2:24 a.m. The Barents Sea erupted. A dark shadow tore through the fog, slicing past the Russian ship at point-blank range. Russia had just sealed off the Arctic with a brutal blockade, but a specter suddenly rose from the depths of the sea, shattering every rule of the Kremlin. A special forces raid, blinding radar, and a breathless standoff began right in the restricted zone. The Barents Sea, one of the richest fishing grounds on the planet, located just off the coast of Norway, NATO's northernmost member. For decades, this region, which generates billions of dollars in trade, has remained stable because everyone played by the rules. Until yesterday. Russia suddenly issued a NOTAM designating vast stretches of international waters larger than several U.S. states as a missile impact zone until April 30th. Moscow claims this is the landing zone for Soyuz 2-1B rockets launched from Plesetsk, carrying the Rassvet satellite, a desperate attempt to build its own Starlink system. Do you remember how Starlink changed the dynamics of the conflict? Russia doesn't want to be left behind, but they've chosen to act right on NATO's doorstep using the most ominous terminology, missile impact zone. 2:36 a.m. Inside the NATO command center, tactical screens begin to turn red. Spotty red vectors appear with increasing density, the distance closing rapidly by the second. The question arises, is this a legitimate satellite launch or a move testing the West's resolve? The atmosphere grows thick as radar detects the operational arcs of Russian S-400 systems overlapping international shipping lanes. The Kremlin is using the missile program as a legal cover to build an invisible wall, challenging the U.S. Navy to see who will blink first. 2:47 a.m. Russia officially slams the door shut, plotting to turn the Arctic into its own backyard. But the U.S. Navy won't stand idly by while international waters are threatened. They've been lying in wait in the shadows. The multi-domain counteroffensive officially begins. 2:55 a.m. Just 8 minutes after the Kremlin's lockdown order took effect, the Arctic's icy silence was shattered by the roar of two CFM56-7B engines. The P-8A Poseidon took off from Andøya Air Base, Norway, heading straight for the heart of the restricted zone. This was not merely a maritime patrol aircraft, it was a flying sensor node lying in wait at the edge of the boundary, awaiting a legal pretext to penetrate. The crew immediately activated the AN/A-PY-10 radar using synthetic aperture radar mode to pierce through the thick fog and map every target within a 200-mile radius. To uncover what lies hidden beneath the surface, the Poseidon's pneumatic system rapidly deployed 120 sonar buoys into the icy waters. A high-tech acoustic network was unfurled, stripping the ocean of its secrecy and exposing the ghost fleet lurking in the darkness. 3:02 a.m. Russia's response is immediate and aggressive. Two Su-33 Flanker D air superiority fighters roar off the runway at Severomorsk 3, closing in on the Poseidon within minutes. These are heavy interceptor aircraft with pilots trained for the highest level of aggression. In a display of calculated recklessness, the lead Su-33 performed a high-speed pass, coming within less than 3 meters of the P-8's nose. The terrifying vortex from the jet engines violently shook the Boeing's airframe, forcing the American pilot to struggle with the controls to avoid a dangerous stall right over the disputed international airspace. On the water, the threat was no less intense. A Russian Project 22,160 patrol boat accelerated to 30 knots, acting as a professional disruptor. Instead of a direct attack, it executed maneuvers to cut across the bow of the NATO logistics ship at point-blank range. The Russian crew continuously fired high-intensity flares, turning the Arctic night into a blinding red haze, while long-range acoustic devices blasted deafening warnings over emergency frequencies. This was a psychological torture campaign aimed at breaking the will of NATO captains and forcing the fleet to disperse. The P-8's mission time is running out, 90 seconds remaining. The crew must maintain their course despite the roaring Su-33 ghosts to complete the collection of the digital fingerprints of the Russian oil tankers. If they back down now, the ghost fleet will vanish forever into the fog, taking with it all secrets regarding the Kremlin's covert financial sources. 3:10 a.m. Boom! Not a gunshot, but an electromagnetic blast tearing through space. From secret caverns carved deep into the bedrock of the Kola Peninsula, Russia activated the electronic monster Krasuka 4. A massive electromagnetic pulse swept across the entire front, creating a wall of white noise on the P-8 screen. All NATO satellite communications were severed in an instant, turning the world's most advanced aircraft into a solitary, deserted island. The U.S. was left digitally blind, and that was the signal for the underwater hunt to begin. Beneath the pitch-black water, the Kilo 636.3 submarine suddenly accelerated as it departed from Gajievo base. To conceal its position, it released a series of acoustic decoys, generating dozens of fake acoustic signatures that completely jammed the U.S. sonar buoy network. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Kilo glides in absolute silence, closing in on NATO's blind spot at a distance of just 2.5 nautical miles. Suddenly, the sound of active sonar pings rings out in rapid succession, pounding against the hull of the U.S. ship like a death knell. Russia opened the launch tubes. The 533mm torpedoes were just waiting for a button press to tear through the surface of the sea. But in this game of cat and mouse, the hunter was unaware that it was itself in the crosshairs of another specter. Russia had no idea that a Virginia-class attack submarine, having departed from Groton Naval Base, had been lying in wait beneath the thick ice for 3 weeks. Using advanced sound-absorbing hull technology, the Virginia lay motionless like a submerged rock, still and undetectable. While the Kilo was fixated on locking onto the P-8, the Virginia had silently turned its fire control computers, tracking every stroke of the Russian submarine's propellers. The battle had reached the point of no return. Only 45 seconds remained. The P-8 was firmly within the Russian periscope's view, and the silence of the ocean floor was about to be shattered by a cataclysmic explosion. If the Virginia did not reveal itself and issue an immediate warning through force, a global catastrophe would erupt right beneath the Arctic ice. 3:15 a.m. The Krasukha 4 electronic fog had temporarily paralyzed NATO, but the Pentagon's counterattack screeched through the atmosphere. To break the deadlock, a squadron of EA-18G Growlers took off from a U.S. supercarrier stationed in the Norwegian Sea. These are the wolves of the electromagnetic spectrum. The crew immediately activated the AN/ALQ-21, a tactical jamming system flooding the airwaves with high-fidelity encrypted jamming signals. Unlike conventional jamming, this system precisely burned out specific frequencies of the Russian Krasukha 4, piercing through the interference. Within seconds, the P-8 Poseidon's radar screens flickered back to life. The hunters were no longer blind. 3:20 a.m., the Kremlin responds with an iron fist. Realizing its electronic shield has been neutralized, Russia escalates to the highest combat readiness level. On the desolate frozen coast of Fisherman's Peninsula Bastion P, coastal defense systems emerged amidst the blizzard. Heavy TEL launchers erect massive launch tubes, the sound of hydraulics screeching through the sub-zero air. Simultaneously, S-400 Triumph long-range air defense missile systems along the Murmansk coast activate the 9-1N6E Big Bird panoramic scanning radar. All NATO aircraft in the restricted zone are suddenly engulfed by a hard-lock pulse, the final electronic handshake before the missile leaves its launcher. The situation becomes extremely dangerous as two P-800 Onyx hypersonic missiles enter their launch countdown. Russia's Mineral ME radar is locked directly onto the flight path of the Growler squadron, its beam piercing through the snow with terrifying intensity. This is no longer a diplomatic dispute. It is a confrontation on the brink of death. The Arctic sky was about to be filled with fire. One, push of a button, and the entire NATO squadron would be reduced to free-falling debris. U.S. commanders had exactly 30 seconds to make a choice that would define the century retreat in the face of hypersonic missiles, or hold their ground and confront the Onyx head-on. 3:25 a.m. As the 30-second countdown ticked down to zero, the Americans revealed the true depth of their network-centric dominance. Stationed far behind the front lines, flying in the safe skies of northern Norway, was the E-7 Wedgetail. This aircraft is the god of the battlefield. Unlike older AWACS platforms that scan the horizon with rotating dishes, the E-7's MESA radar remains stationary, focusing all its electronic power into a single converging beam. It stares at the Barents Sea, tracking thousands of Russian targets simultaneously, from Bastion P launchers on cliffs to even the smallest periscopes of Kilo-class submarines beneath the waves. 3:30 a.m., the U.S. opts to escalate. The E-7 Wedgetail assumes command, bypassing all local delays. Target data is transmitted via Link 16 to the Joint Air Operations Center at Ramstein, Germany. Their AI-coordinated combat management systems process the Russian S-400's radar signature and relay counter tactics back to the front lines in milliseconds. With the E-7 providing a perfect tactical picture, the Growlers and Virginia-class submarines maintain absolute situational awareness, remaining outside the Russian S-400's kill zone while still maintaining their own attack lock-on commands. Exploiting a critical 25-second window when Russian sensors are blinded by a coordinated electromagnetic pulse from the E-7 and Growler, the Virginia-class submarine executes a sharp underwater maneuver. Using its Block 3+ sonar, the Virginia locks onto the Black Hole Kilo-class submarine. But instead of a devastating strike, it dropped a high-intensity noise simulator right next to the Russian vessel. It was a psychological blow, a deafening roar reverberating through the Kilo's hull, carrying a chilling message: "We've got you. You're as good as dead." Russia's collapse was total. The Bastion P systems lost track of their targets as their radar screens were flooded with ghost targets generated by the E-7. On the surface, the Sioux, 33 fighters with their fuel tanks, dropping into the red zone after aggressive maneuvers, were forced to break formation and retreat to Severomorsk 3. 3:40 a.m. As the electronic clutter subsided, the real nightmare appeared on Russia's long-range radar. A U.S. carrier strike group led by the Gerald R. Ford-class supercarrier had materialized right at the edge of the exclusion zone. It was not merely a presence, it was a threat. Hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles were now locked onto the Russian coastline. The Kremlin realized a harsh truth. They hadn't just lost a firefight, they had lost control of the entire Arctic chessboard. 4:15 a.m. While Russia's northern fleet remains paralyzed by electronic failures and psychological shock, NATO delivers the decisive blow. Russia's shadow fleet, the oil tankers that are the lifeblood of its economy, is now completely isolated. Satellite communications have been cut off and their escort vessels have been blinded. NATO activates the divert and detain protocol. Jan Mayen-class patrol ships and MH-60S Seahawk helicopters close in on the oil tanker fleet at high speed. Using high-intensity searchlights and non-negotiable orders, NATO forces forced the fleet to change course. Having lost contact with Moscow and facing NATO artillery, the oil tankers were forced to head toward a Norwegian port for a special security inspection. Russian warships locked in place by hundreds of Tomahawk Block 5 missiles could only watch helplessly. Russia's gamble had failed. 5 a.m. The historic strike was not a barrage of bombs, but absolute dominance. The U.S. carrier strike group controlled every exit from the Barents Sea. Russia finally launched a Soyuz Tu-1B missile, but it was a hollow victory. Moscow has lost its fleet and control of the Arctic. The invisible wall has been breached without a single shot fired. What would happen if Russia pressed the launch button? NATO has already prepared the deadly silence protocol. If a Russian missile leaves its launch pad, NATO will deploy Tomahawk missiles carrying high-altitude electromagnetic pulse warheads to detonate over Murmansk. In a matter of milliseconds, every semiconductor chip and radar in the Northern Fleet would be roasted into scrap metal. This digital wipeout is the Kremlin's greatest fear. A fleet without electronics is nothing more than scrap metal waiting to sink. Would Russia dare to test the limits of US EMP technology? Leave a comment below. Subscribe to Navy Vector for the latest strategic analysis.